you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur.
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the ball!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Coupe Stanley pour les Canadiens, leur 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs! And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup.
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Vida TV. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination. It's gonna be sick.
Marinaro on this Wednesday, June 5th. Hope everyone is well. Thank you for watching on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter. It is the Sick Podcast. And of course, the Sick Podcast is brought to you in part by Energy Transportation Group, a leading full-service logistics provider serving all of North America, driven to be different. Also brought to you in part by, take a look at that fridge, Bittt Tibi, brewed in Quebec, a winner of a dozen international awards. Bittt TV offers quality microbrewery beers made with premium ingredients for everyone's taste. Bittt TV, embrace your true nature. Also brought to you in part by Playground. Experience Playground like never before. Enjoy world-class poker, 900-plus gaming machines, and weekly events, karaoke Mondays, comedy Wednesdays, live bands on Fridays and Saturdays, and much more. Discover the latest editions, Etc. Steakhouse, Drunken Dragons, Exquisite Sushi, the Esperanto Cigar Lounge, and Babel Lounges, Mezza, and Cocktails. Playground, your ultimate destination for entertainment, just over the Mercier Bridge. Only minutes from downtown Montreal. Visit playground.ca for details. And also brought to you in part, of course, by Accent Insurance Solutions. You know that all insurance isn't created equal. You know where to find the right solution for you. That's Accent Insurance. Accent doesn't sell insurance. They shop it for you to find the right product right on the money. Whatever your insurance needs are, home, automobile, or business, call them at 514-363-3636. Check out their website, www.accentassurance.com. Without further ado, he is our guest usually throughout the entire hockey season on Wednesdays. Every now and then, we might have him on for another day, but here on a Wednesday, we have him back. Of course, he's the director of scouting for TSN. He's their hockey analyst. He's a former NHL general manager. Craig Button, how are you?
I am great, Tony. How are you doing? And before we go any further, congratulations on the award you were given.
Thank you.
The contributions you make to the Montreal community in so many different areas in the sports community. Well deserved, and just want to recognize you for that.
Thank you very much. They say it's better late than never. 22 years in, I think it's my first award. But anyway,
you're like a fine wine. You're getting better with age.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Craig, very much. And I thank Mike Cohen and the entire committee, the Jewish Sports Celebrity Breakfast, for honoring me with the Larry Fredericks Award, which is given to a media personality or former member of the Montreal media who covers or represents a Montreal sports team or sports teams, and shows excellence in doing so. And it's nice to receive, as you know, who have received many throughout your career. It's always nice. Craig, I find this is, and now there are two, right? We've gone from 32 teams in the NHL regular season to 16 in the playoffs, and then from 16 to 8 and 8 to 4 and 4 to 2. And here we are. And then there are two, the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers. One of the things we've heard from the outside, and I don't know if it's something that exists on the inside, you would know because you've been there, that it could be a copycat league, that teams will take a look at the two teams in the Stanley Cup Final and say, hold on a second here. Let's try and decipher this. Why are they in the Stanley Cup Final? Did they do it through the draft? Did they do it through free agency? Did they do it through development? Did they do it through, how did they do it? Trades. How did they do it? Is it a copycat league? And do a lot of teams in the National Hockey League look at those two teams that are left to say, what did they do?
I think it's just good practice to look at successful organizations, and certainly whether you're a Stanley Cup champion, whether you're one of the last two teams standing or one of the last four teams standing, you want to take a look at what is allowing a team and an organization to have success. Now, what you can do is you can say, okay, we're going to copy that, or we're going to understand that these areas are things that were really significant to their success. And can we replicate them? Can we do them? Any good organization, I don't care where you are in whatever industry you're in, that you want to emulate the very best. And certainly when you have examples of teams that have had the success and certainly have demonstrated that through their process, and remember, there's many different ways to win, Tony, and there's many different processes, but you try to understand. And I think a lot of times what you want to try to do is understand, okay, that's something that we can do. That's something that applies to us. That's something we can't do. Understanding is not only looking outwards, it's also looking inwards and saying, okay, we can do that, but it doesn't really fit for where we are. And you got to balance that all out. But looking outward and trying to understand what organizations have done to achieve success, always a good practice.
Look, I'm going to have fun doing this because I like the draft very much, and I like everything that goes into roster composition and building a team. And I don't know when this started, Craig, and maybe it started a long time ago, but it just seems to me that in the last couple of years, more and more teams are just trying to have as many first-round picks as possible on their team. Now, the draft is coming up on June 28th and June 29th. The Montreal Canadiens are set to pick 5th and set to pick 26th, unless, of course, there are some trades that's going to happen. And we can't stress the importance of the draft because it shapes your present and your future for a very, very long time. Just take a look at the amount of first-round picks with the Edmonton Oilers and the Florida Panthers. And if these teams didn't go through a rebuild at one point in time, chances are they wouldn't be in the Stanley Cup Final today. The Colorado Avalanche did this a lot. I had a chat with Kent Hughes once, and I said to him, I said, "Are you taking a look at what Colorado did and trying to emulate that?" And he gave a very smart answer, like the way you did, which was you always want to take a look at what winning organizations are doing. And when I talked to him about Colorado, I talked to him about McKinnon 1 and Landeskog 2 and Rantanen 10 and Byram 4 at the time and Makar 4. And then, Nichushkin 10. And they had other players on their team that, Eric Johnson was a first pick overall, and Nazem Kadri was 7 with Toronto, and list goes on and on. And I think he's trying to do that with Montreal, right? And Suzuki came from an organization, but they had drafted him 13th, and the Canadiens drafted Caulfield 15th. And, Chicago drafted Kirby Dach 3rd, and the Canadiens drafted Slavkowski 1st. And Mike Matheson's a first-round pick, and from another team, 24th drafted by Florida, and I think Newhook was something like 16th drafted by Colorado. List goes on and on. There's so many. Is this something that's been happening more over the last couple of years, that it just seems that teams that are going to the final have a lot of first-round picks, or has this been going on for the longest time?
Yeah, well, I think that there's situations, right? So, the teams that are acquiring first-round picks are teams that have had players that are coveted by teams that are trying to win the Stanley Cup. So, you look at Edmonton, you look at Florida. They don't have any first-round picks this year because they said, we're at a different point in our cycle, and we're gonna trade first-round picks to acquire. So, depending where you are with respect to in the league and where your standing is. If you're at the bottom and you're looking at how we're gonna build our organization, well, you know clearly that having high draft picks and those players that can be real significant difference makers are a good path to go along. But then you move away from that. You move away from that area. You move away from that standing as you get better, and then you got to make decisions based on, okay, what do we need to give up to strengthen our team? And whether it be Florida, whether it be Edmonton, whether it be the Colorado Avalanche, whether it be the Vegas Golden Knights, whether it be the Tampa Bay Lightning, they had acquired so many players that were first-round picks and players that turned out to be really good. And then you reach the point where you're saying, okay, we need to add to our team, and how are we going to do that? So first-round picks that become that move to other teams. Teams aren't trading top 10 picks. They're not trading. And let's be clear here. I mean, when you look at the Montreal Canadiens, you look at the Florida, they're acquiring low-round picks. They're acquiring lower first-round picks. And you've heard me say this. I think 21 to 50 in the draft is all the same group of players. And a team that covets a player might, if they were picking 22, they might pick him at 22. But when they're picking 38 and they go, we can't believe he was there, it's because of how they rate and they grade players and evaluate players. But for the most part, I mean, Montreal did it in the Kirby Doc deal. Rarely does a top 10 pick move. Rarely does a top 10 pick move because the history told you, and you better be able to look at the draft as well, not just winning organizations. You just named off a whole bunch of really good players for the Colorado Avalanche that were picked in the top 10. And no team is going to be giving up those picks. You know, it's interesting. I heard the other day, I think it was Tom Fitzgerald said, we'd be open to trading the 10th pick. Well, I've heard teams picking first say we'll be open to trading the first pick. Like, give me a break. There's so little history of teams trading top 10 picks. I get it. We're going to listen. Oh, yeah, we'll hear what other teams have to say. Ultimately, teams know that trading out of the top 10 is something that could come back to really haunt you.
That's a good point you make. So there are teams who are willing to trade their first-round pick, like you mentioned, in the future, depending on where they are. Usually teams that believe that, okay, they're ready to take the next step, they'll trade those picks because they want to get better right away. Mm-hmm. But once you know that you're picking top 10 or picking 4th, 5th, or 6th, you don't want to trade that pick because there's so many great players that have been drafted in those positions.
Exactly, Tony. And again, like general managers are going to hear and like we're open to it, and yeah, we'll listen. And certainly there's been the very rare case, and in the rare cases, the person that was involved in it was a gentleman by the name of Rick Dudley. He's the only general manager I can think of that was moving the first overall pick to move back and to try to maneuver. And he didn't move out of the top 10. He might have moved back to 3. And the example that comes to mind is when he took Jay Bouwmeester at 3 and I believe it was allowed Columbus to take Rick Nash. So he maneuvered, but he didn't move out of the top 5. He didn't move out of the top 10. I mean, he looked at trying to get a little bit extra. But for the vast majority of teams, they don't trade these picks. They listen, they hear. And ultimately what it comes down to is teams have spent a lot of time going through the scouting process. They spend a lot of time in their own internal discussions and meetings and trying to say, here's who we want. And now you sit back and you look and go, well, these are players that we want. These are players that we think can make a difference to our team. And you're not willing to move back. And that just becomes part and parcel. Like Columbus Blue Jackets took Pierre-Luc Dubois at number 3. And that was a draft with Matthews and Laine, and everybody thought that Puljujarvi was the next guy there.
Correct.
And Jarmo Kekalainen looked at the draft. He looked at it and he said, okay, maybe I could get Pierre-Luc Dubois. But once he went and did the work, he said, I want Pierre-Luc Dubois. And I've had overtures for the 3rd pick, but he said, I'm not going to get Pierre-Luc Dubois if I trade out of 3. He said it's not going to happen. And so he took Pierre-Luc Dubois at 3, and that's the example I use. Steve Yzerman with Moritz Seider. He took him at 6. That was a player they really wanted. There was no other player that came close to that player at 6, and they coveted him. And Steve talked to other teams, and he came to the realization, I'm not going to get the player we really want, so we don't trade him. You open up your mind, there might be an opportunity to trade back at a certain point in time. It's rare. It rarely happens in the top 10. And it's because teams do covet these players. And once they do their research and go through the process of hearing what they could get, and then can they get the same player? Because ultimately they want to get the same player that they would have taken at that spot. And what they come to the realization is, you're not getting that player later.
Yeah. One time it did happen was the 99 draft, right? Where it was not Tampa was supposed to go 1, Atlanta 2, Vancouver 3. And in the end, Tampa traded out. Atlanta ended up with the first pick, and then Vancouver had picks 2 and 3, right? So Brian Burke made that. And
do you know who the manager was in Tampa?
Was Brian
I told you Burke, it was Rick Dudley.
It was
Rick Dudley's the only guy that's ever traded out of the first spot. I'm talking about at the time. Yeah. And Brian Burke had to maneuver with him. He traded Brian McCabe to get picks, and there was a lot of machinations that went into that. But Rick Dudley did it in 02, and he did it in 99. Wow. That's why I said, Rick Dudley's the only guy that I've seen ever do it.
Yeah. All right, so let's take a look at. We'll start with the Oilers, right? And not all the picks are going to be there, but I think everyone's going to be able to get our drift. I think we put together a chart. Look at this. All right, drafted Ryan Nugent-Hopkins first overall, McDavid first overall, Draisaitl third overall, Darnell Nurse 7th overall, Broberg 8th overall, Evan Bouchard 10th overall. Those are some pretty important players there that were drafted by the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, everyone talks about, well, you know what, there's teams that are bad for a long time, but if they're not bad for a long time, and yes, I get it, you got to draft, but man, if they're not bad for a long time, they're not in the Stanley Cup Final.
I would not disagree with that sentiment, Tony.
Yeah.
And I mean, just on the basis of McDavid and Draisaitl, who are we know that they're two of the best 5 players on the planet, if not two of the best 3 players on the planet. And certainly, 1 and 3, and you consider the impact they have. But you're right, like in that draft, which is the 2015 draft, they won the lottery. And if they don't get it, well, the second pick in that draft was Jack Eichel. And Draisaitl, if they don't have the 3rd pick in that draft and teams don't pick in front of them the players that they did, and in that case, that was Aaron Ekblad and Sam Reinhart, you don't get a crack at it. But you have to have the ability to be in those spots to get those players. Because, McDavid was going 1. And if you're not in that spot, you forget it. It's over. Yeah. And I'm not here to knock it. Jack Eichel won a Stanley Cup last year with Vegas, and he's he's a star. But he's not McDavid. And you're certainly right when you talk about being in those positions and being at the bottom of the league, at the top of the draft board to be there.
And you know what? It's not only the drafting, like you said, you got to be a little bit lucky too, right? You just talked about Leon Draisaitl, who went 3rd overall in 2014. Let's take a look at that draft. I mean, Ekblad goes 1 to Florida. Reinhart goes 2 to Buffalo. With all due respect to Ekblad and Reinhart, 2 very good players who are, also in the Stanley Cup Final. If one of those teams ends up choosing Draisaitl, he's not there for Edmonton. They're probably not in the final. So you got to get lucky too.
Well, I got a funny feeling you're going to throw up a board here for Florida that reflects some of that as well.
I will in a couple of minutes. Yes.
Yeah, and I kind of anticipated that. But you're right. But at the time, and so it's easy to go back after the fact, and we all know 4 or 5 years after. Okay, who should have gone 1? Who should have gone 2? We all talk about the sleepers. But at the time, when you're looking at the draft, I mean, you're trying to look at players that are really good. Sam Reinhart was an excellent player. Aaron Ekblad, that big right shot defender. Draisaitl was good. Sam Bennett was in that category of player. And you start to look at it, and you at that point in time, I don't think anybody said, what is Florida doing taking Ekblad, and what is Buffalo doing taking Reinhart? You look at it and you say, this was the group of players. It really was the group of players that were in that mix. And then there's development, and then there's improvement, and then there's players that take the next step. And Leon Draisaitl was a really good prospect. You don't go third by accident. But what he's been able to do, and we've seen it from other players that aren't drafted 1st overall, we've seen it from players certainly drafted outside of the 1st round, that they just take such significant development steps that they become the player that they are. And Leon Draisaitl, he's an absolute superstar. And I'm not here to knock Ekblad or Reinhart. It's not even close between those two and Draisaitl.
This Evan Bouchard pick at number 10 is really something too. The 2018 draft. The first player that went in that draft was defenseman Rasmus Dahlin. The next time a defenseman went out was Quinn Hughes to Vancouver at 7, Boquist to Chicago at 8, Evan Bouchard at 10 to Edmonton. You can make an argument, but it's very, very close because they're all different players, that the player that went 1st overall is not the best defenseman in that draft. I think he's great, Rasmus Dahlin. But there, you will have some who will say, you know what, give me Quinn Hughes over Rasmus Dahlin. You might even have some saying, give me Evan Bouchard the way he came on really this year. It's unbelievable the way he came on this year. But isn't that something? You get a defenseman, the quality of an Evan Bouchard at 10th. And that's why this year, I take a look at this draft and, you know it better than anybody. All the defensemen, all the names that we're hearing, right? Byam, Dickinson, Siliev, Lev Shunov, Perek, list goes on and on. Who knows who the best defenseman is going to be? And you might end up picking 10th, and you might end up getting the best defenseman in the draft, or one that's not too far from the best defenseman in the draft.
I talked about this during the Memorial Cup at Saginaw, because you had Sam Dickinson there and you had Zane Parekh. And I went back, I'm pretty sure the 08 draft. I'm pretty sure it's the 08 draft. I want to make sure of that. But the second pick in the draft was Drew Doughty. The third pick in the draft was Zach Bogosian. The fourth pick in the draft was Alex Pietrangelo. The fifth pick in the draft was Luke Schenn. And then it went through a bunch of forwards. And then you had Tyler Myers, went 12th. 13th was Colton Tubert. Now keep this in mind.
You're right. I have it in front of me, by the way. It is 08. I have it in front of me. Continue, please. Okay. Yeah.
So Colton Tubert went 13th to the LA Kings. They drafted Doughty. They traded with Calgary in that draft. Calgary traded LA traded Camilleri to Calgary, and then Los Angeles moved up to 13 and took Colton Tubert. The 15th pick in that draft was Erik Karlsson. Now, and John Carlson went late in the first round. John Carlson went to Washington late in the first round. So just to your point, we can talk about that 2018 draft, but how about that? Doughty's going to the Hall of Fame. Carlson's going to the Hall of Fame. Yeah. I can make a case for Pietrangelo and John Carlson going to the Hall of Fame. And and then you look at the defenseman that went in front of Carlson and went ahead of John Carlson. I mean, and that's exactly to your point. But those players were all good players. They were all good players at the level at that time. Like, again, when Luke Schenn went 5th, nobody went, oh, my God, can you believe they took Luke Schenn 5? Nobody did that. Zach Bogosian was a really good junior. And it speaks to so when we talk about copycat, so it's not just how you acquired players. You better look at development. You better look, okay, what did they do with this player? What type of coach did they have? Where did they come from? How patient were they? How ready were the players to come into the league? What kind of support did they have around them? So we can look at the roster and go, here's how they got them. There is so much that goes into that evaluation of what successful teams do. And I think that becomes a significant factor in looking at it from an overall point of view. And Erik Karlsson was really good. What I said was the same things I hear about Zane Parekh were the same things I heard about Erik Karlsson in his draft year. Now, that doesn't mean people were wrong. It doesn't mean people that are wrong today. It's just that there's a cautionary tale there. Just like there's a cautionary tale with Dahlin going 1 and certainly Quinn Hughes going 7, who I think will win the Norris Trophy this year. Dahlin has been in the Norris Trophy conversation, and Evan Bouchard now will be in the Norris Trophy conversation. So there's development, there's progress, there's timetables, and you look at it now and you go, there's no way they're in any type of spot. Yeah, we know they're not in a position to win and compete for the Stanley Cup without McDavid and Draisaitl. They're not in any position to compete for the Stanley Cup without Evan Bouchard.
Let's take a look at some of the trades and some of the free agent signings that they made as well, as we'll bring back up the chart if we can. All right, look at that. There's a big one. Ken Holland acquires Matthias Ekholm, who was, by the way, not a first-round pick, but he was a fourth-round pick, 102nd overall, and a sixth-rounder acquired in return for Barry Schaefer, a first and a fourth. And then free agents, once again, talk about getting lucky. Toronto had Zach Hyman, and they didn't want to give him his money. And Edmonton said, you know what, we'll give it to you. So he went to Edmonton, 7 years at 5.5. Evander Kane's also a top 6 on that team. He's an important player on that team as well. There was I don't know if it was a buyout or whatever back in the day with San Jose, obviously because of some of his personal issues. And they released him. And Edmonton picked him up 1 year at $1 million. Everyone was wondering which team was the team that was going to take the chance. In the end, it was the Oilers. And then they liked what they saw, obviously, and they gave him a 4-year deal at $5.5 million a year. count me among those, Craig, I'm not going to lie to you. Count me among those who, once the story started to surface on Evander Kane and some of the problems he was having in his personal life, I said, this is a stupid move to acquire a player like that. He's going to disrupt everything they have going on in that locker room. He's in the Stanley Cup Final.
If one player can disrupt everything in your dressing room isn't very good to begin with. Bottom line. And Ken Holland, looked at it and understood what was going on. There's lots of people that have, issues going on in their private and their personal lives, and that was no different from Evander. And it got to a point where San Jose said, "Okay, we're not ready to deal with this anymore." But now, again, I'm going to go back to organizations. How do you support a player? How do you help a player, push through some of these areas where he can continue to be a good player and address some of the personal issues? People are going to go through personal issues. If we just discard people because they go through a personal issue or they have some struggles, there's going to be a lot of people sitting on the side of the road. And Ken Holland, who has a lot of experience, the first thing you got to do is understand your own organization. You got to understand, okay, what type of people do we have here that can support Evander Kane, and what are we getting from Evander Kane? And the first year they signed it was 1 year. Evander wanted to prove some things, and so you have a motivated player. Then they sign him for 5.5. If you go back and look at Evander Kane's, statistics, I mean, this was a really good player. He was big, he was strong, he was a power forward. The goals he had scored, I mean, he'd been a really good, consistent goal scorer. But those are taking chances. Ekholm, I'll go back to Ekholm. It was really interesting because it dovetails with Bouchard. And Reed Schaefer was a first-round draft pick. They traded a first-round draft pick. But when they traded Tyson Barrie, there was uproar in Edmonton. How can they trade Tyson Barrie? He's one of Connor McDavid's best friends. He runs the power play. This is silly. Oh, yeah? Really? The power play became better with Evan Bouchard, not worse. And I get where it's at. And I'll be very clear here. I knew Ekholm was in the mix, and I thought Jacob Chychrun would have been a better fit for the Edmonton Oilers than Matthias Ekholm. Wrong, Craig. Wrong answer. Matthias Ekholm has been an absolute brilliant acquisition by Ken Holland. That to me, and Jacob Chychrun's a good player, but for what they needed and what they were looking for, because it wasn't just Matthias Ekholm and that type of player, it was also how he could help. Oh, by the way, Evan Bouchard become a better player. Yeah. So 1 + 1 + 1 equaled about 8. And Ken Holland did a magnificent job with that. And that's the manager's job. Hyman was just, Toronto, we could have an episode one time about the Toronto Maple Leafs, how they have completely, I think they have failed spectacularly, Tony, with respect to having Austin Matthews, having William Nylander, having Mitch Marner. They had Hyman, they had Kadri, they had good players, and they failed spectacularly being handed something so significant. That's for another episode. And they get Hyman because of the spectacular failures of the Toronto Maple Leafs management.
Yeah, you know what? You're right about that. My buddy Robin, I mentioned this before, gave me a call a couple of months ago, probably give or take about a month ago, actually. And he said, Tony, the Toronto Maple Leafs could be a case study on how to screw something up. And, I don't think he was far off, Rob, when he talked about that. But I want to get back Ekholm, you talked about Ekholm and Chychrun, that you thought Chychrun would have been a better fit. Ekholm had a big advantage. He played for a winning franchise before that in Nashville. He tasted the playoffs, and he had gone to a Stanley Cup Final. So I think he knew what it took to get there. And I think Chychrun was part of a losing organization for a long time. Is that fair, or is that unfair?
Jeez, I'm so mad at you now because that's the type of information I needed to make a better assessment of who would have been a better fit.
You had that information.
I did. You know what? But you miss it. There's things you miss. Things you become. I think Jacob is a really good player. I thought his contract was really significant. He's a different player than Matthias Ekholm. But everything you just pointed out, and this is where organizations, this is where it's important to get input from all the different areas of an organization. Okay, what does it mean? What did he do? What's his history? And it's great to have an opinion, but what you just said, what is instrumental to making these types of bigger decisions, and what does it come down to when you're trying to debate between this player and that player? these are the lines and these are the areas you start to explore. So, Tony, what you just pointed out, significant, and you're right. And that's where Ken Holland's experience really paid off, because if Craig Button's in that seat, he's going to work to get Jacob Chychrun. And I know they had discussions on Jacob Chychrun because you're going to talk about different players. But Ken Holland absolutely 100% made the right decision for his organization, because guess what? They're not here without Matthias Ekholm either.
No, they're not. And you know what? They're probably not there if they don't make the coaching change either. And so they kind of remind me away of the St. Louis Blues, who were like the last team in the National Hockey League back on January the 3rd or January the 4th or whatever it was. They make a coaching change. They bring in Craig Berube at the time. His team goes all the way and wins the Stanley Cup. And it's really something, is that sometimes a coaching change can turn around your season like that.
Yeah, and you reach a point, and I say this often, you're watching your team perform, the manager's talking all the time to the coach, you're trying to help them come to work through the challenges. Because every team and at different points of the year, you're going to come across different challenges, and you're trying to find solutions to those challenges. And the manager, Kenny Holland, is great at this. He's always talking to us, trying to support, okay, what are we looking at? And you're starting to go, maybe we need a coaching change. And that becomes the easiest part of the equation. The hardest part of the equation is going, okay, who do we get to replace that coach that can get us to where we think we should be, or where we need to be, or what we think our capabilities are? That is not easy to do. I've talked about Chris Knobloch having, when he makes decisions, he's got conviction. Well, Jeff Jackson and Ken Holland had conviction on Chris Knobloch as well. Because you're introducing a coach that hadn't coached in the NHL, but they, again, back to the work they had done, they knew that Chris Knobloch was going to walk into that dressing room with credibility because of McDavid. And Chris Knobloch is sharp. He's been deserving of an NHL head coaching job for a number of years now. And look what's happened. I mean, he has turned that franchise from 31st in the league right here on the cusp of being 4 wins shy of a Stanley Cup.
So that's pretty much how the Oilers were built. Mind you, there's other examples that we didn't give, but the Florida Panthers are even much more interesting. Let's take a look at this. Let's bring up their chart. The players they drafted: Ekblad at number 1, Barkov at number 2, Lundell at number 12, Kulikov at 14. Mind you, let's kind of put an asterisk next to Kulikov because they did draft him at 14, but then he ended up getting traded away. He ended up being with a couple of other organizations before they actually ended up reacquiring him back, okay? Trades. Wow. So they not only drafted 2 really good players, a couple of really good players, they made some trades, but take a look at the trades that they made. They acquired Sam Reinhart, who's a former number 2 pick overall by Buffalo. They acquired him for Devin Levi and a first. They acquired Matthew Tkachuk, who was a former 6th overall by Calgary. He was acquired in return for Huberdeau and Weegar. And that trade doesn't happen if the Panthers aren't bad, because the Panthers were bad, they got Huberdeau at 3rd overall. They acquire Sam Bennett, who had been drafted 4th overall by Calgary. He's acquired in return for Emil Heineman and a 2nd rounder. And they acquired Tarasenko, who was a 16th pick overall by St. Louis, in return for a 3rd and a 4th. Can you believe the players they acquired, and actually just how little they gave up for those players? Look at that on paper. Look at that on paper.
What
they gave up. It's unbelievable.
So do you know why Buffalo has missed the playoffs for 13 straight years or whatever it is?
Yeah, I'm seeing it documented right here.
Yeah, well, you see it documented there. You see it documented, trading Jack Eichel, because Jack Eichel had it with losing. They traded Ryan O'Reilly because he had it with losing. And they were outspoken, and they had significant changeover in terms of their management groups, and that affects things too. But some really poor decisions were made. I mean, Devin Levi was a 7th round draft pick, and then now you're talking about a 1st round draft pick you give up that's late because Florida is good. They get Ryan. Matthew Tkachuk was an example, and Mackenzie Weegar's a really good player. Huberdeau was coming off 115 points, but I'm going to go to a place here, and where the Florida Panthers had won the 1st round of the playoffs that year, that playoff season. Yeah. And then they lost 4 straight to the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Correct.
And scored 3 goals. They scored 3 goals in that 4-game loss. And Bill Zito said, and he was bold. He was bold.
And he didn't like
and
what
he
he saw
said,
from Huberdeau in that round. He didn't like what he saw from Huberdeau in that round.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen. I mean, at the end of it all, they have to include Huberdeau and Weegar to make the money work for Tkachuk, because that's where they were at.
Yeah.
So there's going to be times when you don't like what a player does in a particular round. It wasn't like, maybe people are going to make it about Huberdeau, and maybe Bill will have a story about it. That bottom line is Matthew Tkachuk is everything that Jonathan Huberdeau has never been. A massive, unique, unicorn difference maker. And Bill Zito said, I don't care. He goes, I don't like where we're at. I'm going to be bold. Just like Kelly McCrimmon and George McPhee were bold in Vegas. I hear so many people talk about, we want to win. And then when it comes time to win, they're not bold. And so, again, we're going to talk about copycat. We're going to talk about what have teams done. Being bold is a significant attribute to getting your team into a good spot. Sam Bennett, the Calgary Flames drafted him 4th in that draft in 2014. And he hadn't become what they thought he would have, what they wanted him to be. Well, wait a sec. He's a competitor. He's a good player. Just accept him for what he was. But no, they were disappointed in. And I remember over the years, you go, what? Maybe they overprojected him. Does that mean you don't want that type of player? People would kill to have Sam Bennett on their team. I mean, a second-round pick and Emil Hanneman? Like, come on. Like, that's nothing. They gave him away. Tarasenko comes this year at the deadline. He's won a Stanley Cup. We saw the Rangers pick him up last year. But a 3rd and 4th round pick from the Ottawa Senators, I mean, you're just trying to strengthen your offense down the stretch, and that's what Tarasenko does. But and keep in mind, and I know you're going to move over to the UFA, Bill Zito was in Columbus when Bobrovsky won a Vezina Trophy there.
You're right.
So, and he wasn't there. He wasn't there when they signed him, but he came there. And he knew Bobrovsky. And it became something really significant when he got there to just get Bobrovsky back to what he was. There was a lot of pressure on Sergei Bobrovsky going to Florida because the narrative was he's the guy that's going to make a difference for us. We finally got that goalie. And that was a lot of pressure. And when it all got said and done, Bill Zito wasn't just bold in terms of the moves he made. He was also bold, and maybe bold as well. He was also bullish on Bobrovsky. And look where Bobrovsky's at now. I mean, a terrific goaltender, what he did last year. That's management too. Believing in people when they deserve to be believed in.
Yeah, and it's a former, like, that was Dale Talon too, right? Bobrovsky?
Yep.
That was Dale. And you know what? It's I bring this up because Bill Zito is going to get a lot of credit here, and rightfully so. But it doesn't diminish the work that Dale Talon did before him. It's just like Julien Brisebois gets a lot of credit for what he did in Tampa, but the groundwork was set by Steve Yzerman. I mean, Brisebois was able to take it over the line, but Yzerman did a lot of work there too. And, Zito's been able to take this thing over the line, but Dale Talon did a lot of good things too. That's hockey's unfair that way sometimes, though.
Yeah, and it happens. And you come in, unless you come in with an expansion team. So Bill Torrey completely built up the New York Islanders. He deserves all the credit. He had a staff. Cliff Fletcher went to the Atlanta Flames, moved to Calgary. He deserves all the credit for that Stanley Cup in '89. The dynasty is Bill Torrey's. And so unless you come into an expansion team, like George McPhee and Kelly McCrimmon, they deserve all the credit in Vegas because they were there from day one.
Yeah.
But unless you come in with an expansion team and build it up to success, there's a lot of fingerprints over the success of a team, just as you pointed out. You talk about Dale, you talk about Julien Brisebois, and people, they would have never got there. Okay, it doesn't matter if they would have or not. That's speculative. Bottom line is let's recognize the work that they did and the input they had towards success.
So we'll finish it off with this. When is it time, in your opinion, for the Montreal Canadiens management team to be very bold? Is it necessary at this point?
Look at you. You go and you put very in front of the word bold.
I think they were bold already in acquiring Kirby Dach. Don't you think? That was bold. No?
Yeah. I'm not going to say it wasn't bold, right? Here's how I'm going to frame this, first of all. I think that the Montreal Canadiens, when you look at where their team has been, they need to move from the bottom 25% of the league, which is where they've been residing, right? And they need to move into the next 2/3. Now, the next 2/3, when you start to break it down, they got to get into that area that's not 24 or 23 to 32 or 22 to they need to get into that 21, 20, 19, 18 range. That's where I think they got to be looking to get to. I don't think you can make these huge jumps into the top half of the league and be one of the 16 playoff teams just like that. I think there's a process, there's a time, there's a maturity that needs to happen with your players. So what I would say is those are the next steps for the Montreal Canadiens. And if that gives you an opportunity to do that, I don't think they should be looking at saying this is something that's going to get us to be win a first round in the playoffs. I think they need to be very bold about getting themselves into that 18 to 23 grouping in the National Hockey League, closer to 18 than 23. And if they can do that, they need to be very bold in acquiring players and making decisions that can help them get there. The first part with Kirby Dach and doing those were really significant. They took advantage of the COVID CBA, with cap space, LTIR, and they did a lot of good things. They got a wealth of talent in their prospect pool. Well, a wealth of talent now needs to be used not only to wear Montreal Canadiens jerseys, but also to get other players that can wear Montreal Canadiens jerseys that can move you ahead. So that's how I differentiate between very bold. They need to be very bold to move out of the place they've been for the last few years so that they can start to really see signs for their young players that we're serious.
Craig, thanks so much for joining me again tonight. We'll talk to you soon, and I can't wait to hook up with you at the draft.
Oh, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. Sammy and I now will be there too. So we're going to enjoy Vegas. Now, I will tell you this. So they're calling for about 120 degrees during the day, so we're going to have to find a cool place.
An air-conditioned restaurant over a bottle of Camus. We'll see you then. Take care. There you have it. Craig Button, TSN hockey analyst and director of scouting. Special thanks to all of you. And once again, special thanks to Energy Transportation Group. Special thanks to Bittt Tibi. Special thanks to Playground. Special thanks to Accent Insurance Solutions. And once again, reminding you all once again that this Friday, I will be at Winnie's. It's going to be a live Habs podcast during Grand Prix weekend, 1455 Crescent Street. And look who's joining me. They call him the Snake. I call him Uzarpent. He's going to be live there in the flesh. Simon, the Snake, Boisvert, and yours truly, Marinaro, this Friday, June 7th, 1 p.m. for a live show, which we'll upload later on at night. You'll be able to watch it at 10 p.m. as well. Live from Sir Winston's, Winnie's. Always a great time. Thanks for watching. Have a great night. For Agnello and Sammy and Master Control, they're Cavallaro. I'm Marinaro.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow The Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, driven to be different. LaVie.tv, embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination.